Hi, I'm Army Staff Sergeant Anthony Halsey with the Minnesota National Guard. Thank you for joining us today on the latest episode of the Ripley Reporter. Today we'll talk about a little bit of Camp Ripley, the Minnesota National Guard itself and some of our programs, and also the units conducting training on the installation. Joining me today is Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Baker, Commander of the 1st Battalion, 175th Regional Training Institute on Camp Ripley. Ma'am, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Currently, I'm the commanding officer for the 1st Battalion, 175th Regional Training Institute. Within my academic battalion, we train officer candidates, both officer candidates from Minnesota and 5 other states, but warrant officer candidates as well.
And what all comprises of the 175th? What is that made of?
The Regional Training Institute, the 175th, as it's called, is comprised of about 31 different courses. It's an academic military institution that focuses on training the force, training NCOs, training officers, training people in functional courses in areas that include everything from wheeled vehicle maintenance to being medics with certifications.
Okay, and the OCS program itself, the Officers Candidate Program, what's that like?
It's a rigorous training program that's meant to be how we progress soldiers from being enlisted to future leaders and officers in the force. We're grooming the future leadership of the Army National Guard Officer Corps right here in the 1st Battalion, 175th.
And you have a class going on right now, or finishing up right now, actually?
Just completing Class 62, in fact. And this particular class hails from 6 different states. We're a regional asset, and we train as a region each summer in June. We had Phase 1 candidates here this summer, and they came from Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And all those states came into one large class, Class 62, started off with 95 candidates, and today we just graduated 90.
Oh, wow. That's an achievement.
Absolutely. We were very proud to see such a high success rate and that they were so adept making the transition from enlisted to the beginning of their officer pre-commissioning training.
Now, Class 62, that means that OCS has been around for quite a while. Is training different as the way it's been in the past?
Officers have been groomed for a couple hundred years in the Army and the Army National Guard, which came about as a militia in 1636. So it's been a long time that we've had officers in the force. The actual grooming of future officers is almost untouched since the early 1940s. The Officer Candidate School has been a part of the force, the academic military force, for decades. And how we actually train and groom and mentor enlisted personnel to become the future officer corps is largely untouched.
Okay. What are some of the events that these candidates took part in over the past few weeks?
They went through some challenging training. First off, we bring them in as a large group, and a couple of days into training, we set them out on a 6-mile foot march with weapons, with Kevlar helmets, with rucksacks that have a substantial amount of weight in them. Very early in the morning is that start. And we send them off for 6 full miles of foot march. And that's how we kick off this 2 weeks of training, this initial Phase 1. We push them hard on academics as well. There's a slew of topics that are very specific to being a military officer that we want them to enter the force knowing. We want them to know about Army training systems. We want them to know about military ethics and military justice. We want them to be effective communicators who can train, plan, and groom all of those that they're asked to lead. So it's challenging to start with a 6-mile foot march, move into land navigation out in the reservation where there are no asphalt trails. It's all through the woods.
Bang, bang! See the target!
And then to culminate with weapons training on 5 different weapon systems.
So it's mental as well as physical.
Absolutely. We ask our officers to be both physically adept and mentally agile. The hallmark of an excellent officer is that they have this medal, that the medal of an officer is their intellect.
And this training has been accepted by both men and women as officers.
It is. This is actually kind of a watershed year. In 2017, this is the first time that there is no segregated barracks, no segregated training at all. It's completely gender integrated. And we take our cues from the infantry school at Fort Benning, Georgia, and we've emulated their integration, doing the very same thing here in our Minnesota course.
And all the students that come in, all the candidates that come in from these 6 different states, they're all from a variety of different career fields as an enlisted soldier, right?
Absolutely. They could walk into our program having been medics or heavy-wheeled mechanics, diesel generator mechanics. They could be financial specialists or supply clerks. But when they show up for OCS and they want to become an officer candidate in Phase 1, we're really trying to convert them into a generalist, the beginnings of a generalist and an officer.
The program itself, so once they come into this program and they get all of their equipment and they're standing in this formation, is it like basic training all over again? How are they received?
They are received with a challenging first couple of days after in-processing. So we take them from the point where they stopped that basic combat training or that last military education that they went through, and then we keep progressing forward towards officership.
Okay.
We're building on that fundamental level of military education and taking another step forward.
What are some of the other events that they take part in over these 2 weeks?
We put them through a series of academic instruction, and that's class after class, like I'd mentioned before, but in the second week, they get to shift to the tactical side of becoming officers. We ensure that they know the basics of reading a 1/50,000 military map and how to translate that map reading to actual terrain association. We bring them to 3 different very densely wooded, hilly, water barrier type of terrain, and we bring them to these 3 different pieces of terrain on purpose to test their skills, the application of that map reading. Once we bring them back after successful examination in the land navigation phase, then we transition them to everything from rifles to grenade launchers to heavy machine guns, familiarizing on all of those weapon systems so that the last thing that they do is very hands-on, very tactical before we send them back to their home states.
There has to be a little bit of fun involved with that as well.
Absolutely. Every single candidate that comes to our program gets the chance to do an end-of-cycle critique. And that after-action review, where they get the chance to put in their candid, unvarnished feedback about how Phase 1 was conducted from their perspective, we take that into account. It's taken with some gravity because that's their perspective as a participant, not an observer or a trainer, but as a participant, what they gained from these last 15 days of training.
And has it been, over the past few years and whatnot, has it been a challenge to get officer candidates out of the formation, or has it been pretty easy?
Challenge. I think the challenge is in more so, that's on my cadre shoulders. They really absorb the work. They put in exceedingly long days with all 6 states worth of candidates. The candidates just show up ready to train. But the cadre, they absorb a lot of the work. They get the challenge of, and the burden of that first phase, that initial phase of creating future officers. The challenging part for throughput, or the number of officers that we're able to produce, sometimes that has outside external circumstances involved, but each year we have between 90 and 120 officer candidates that come from our region just to train here for Phase 1.
And how many did you have this year?
We started with 95 and finished with 90, so a fairly high success rate.
Right, that is incredible. That is incredible. And they're all off to their home states today, in fact.
Today, in fact, they will board charter buses or planes and head back to all 6 of those states so that they can continue on for the next 11 months in Phase 2, being groomed and mentored by their home state NCOs and officers. And then they'll culminate their training with another 2-week block, Phase 3, and then be commissioned in August of 2018.
Okay, so there's multiple layers, multiple phases to this whole program.
It is built that way on purpose. One, we want commitment. We want them to have commitment and longevity within a program that tests their physical and their intellectual abilities. And yes, after 14 months, if you can make it through all 3 phases, you transition successfully as a second lieutenant in the Army National Guard of your home state that next August.
Now, the way I understand it, the way I've seen it in the Army, that there's almost that friendly competition, almost a little bit of rivalry between an OCS graduated officer and, let's say, one that graduated from West Point. Is that still kind of in existence, or throughout the reserve and the active forces, everybody still accepted as a future leader?
I'd say that the competition, at least in our home state here in Minnesota, isn't so much with academy grads. They're so few and far between. Here in Minnesota, there's a much higher proportion of ROTC graduates and officer candidate school graduates. So if we were looking at cohorts within the officer corps and in the state of Minnesota, those might be the 2 big groups to identify where they got their commissioning from, their commissioning source, ROTC and OCS. Competition, maybe. I won't speak for all my peers, but there was competition at Phase 1. We had a candidate pull-up contest that would have rivaled anything that the Marines do at Quantico. And there was a candidate who I made sure got an award today at the ceremony. He did 18 dead hang pull-ups. 18.
That's a lot.
After 4 days of rather strenuous physical activity at the beginning of OCS, and it was absolutely praiseworthy in front of 100 people at today's ceremony.
Speaking of today's ceremony, you handed out quite a few awards today.
Indeed. We have an exceptional cadre. That's the group of instructors and trainers that come together to do both the leadership, grooming, mentorship side of building officers, but also the instructional content that takes place in the classroom. Those 2 groups together become the cadre that really grooms that future officer corps. And among them, I had a staff sergeant that came from, I want to say he was from Illinois, and he was just exceptional. And we made sure to reward him and recognize him in front of the entire organization today with an Army Commendation Medal.
Okay, interesting. As far as the cadre and yourself, now that this class is moving on to the next phase, are you all going to take a break, or do you start again tomorrow with the next group?
No breaks. I'm happy to report that immediately at July drill, we will be focusing again on all 3 classes within the 1st Battalion of the 175th. We'll have the class that just completed Phase 1, Class 62. We'll have the class that's nearly commissioned, Class 61. And we have a warrant officer class in session, all 3 at the same time at July drill. No breaks.
That's very busy. And you're all spread out across the 53,000 acres that makes up Camp Ripley, I suppose.
From the opening ceremony, that was one of the lines that I used to try to motivate the candidates to stay focused. Although Camp Ripley is an extremely high potential, high payoff training installation, I just wanted them to focus on 1 acre out of the 53,000. Tighten their focus, stay on task, and make their way to graduation today.
That's an incredible piece of advice right there. I think that's very good. Now, what is your recommendation for service members that are considering OCS? They're kind of on the fence about whether or not they want to make that career from enlisted to officer.
Get off the fence. Absolutely. That's my unqualified advice. Get past the pondering and get to the decision to do it. It's a great way here in the state of Minnesota to go after your commission and become an officer. You can stay here in Minnesota. You don't have to go far away for training. It's built just like the rest of the drilling force. So you show up to drills, and that's how you accomplish the officer candidate school to get your commission. It can fit into your Minnesota lifestyle. Get off the fence, decide to do it today.
Terrific. What's the best way for folks to reach out to become an officer candidate?
The best way to reach out, we've got online contacts if people are inclined to use minnesotaNationalGuard.org. We've got our own Facebook to really get a feel and see the candid, in-action photos of drill to drill, what's going on in the Officer Candidate Battalion. And if you're so inclined, contact us directly. I've got a business card in my pocket, and I have a full-time Sergeant First Class that runs the organization every day of the week, to include drill weekends.
Terrific, terrific. Ma'am, is there anything else you'd like to include today?
It's been an incredible first year in command. I'm so proud of the officer candidates that have come through the program. I've seen one group commission. I'm about to commission a second group of brand new second lieutenants into the force. I've seen one group of warrant officers and about to see my second group of warrant officers join the force. It's super rewarding, and I can't wait to get to the commissioning ceremony in August.
Terrific. Well, I understand that you have a busy day ahead of you, so I won't keep you. But I do thank you for joining me on this episode of the Ripley Reporter.
My pleasure.
Thank you. For more information about the 175th RTI for Camp Ripley and the Minnesota National Guard, please reach out to us on www.minnesotanationalguard.org. You can also follow us by searching through any of the social media networks. I want to thank you once again. I'm Army Staff Sergeant Anthony Housey for the Ripley Reporter.